and Donald Trump did it anyway. See, the Supreme Court is rewarding the unconstitutional behavior of Donald Trump every time they rule in his favor this way. In light of the government's flagrantly unlawful conduct, today's decision might suggest the government faces extraordinary harms.
Does it feel like the Supreme Court is rewriting the rules of democracy right in front of you? You're not alone. We're breaking down how this new presidential immunity ruling could impact not just Trump, but every president after him, and why Justice Sotomayor is outraged. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now, back to the video. What if the president could press pause on accountability, wave at the rule of law, and walk away clean? That's basically what the Supreme Court just decided. Their ruling leaned on something called presumptive immunity, a legal theory which in plain English boils down to offering presidents a get out of jail free card as long as they're still in office, or even after they've left in this case. And let me just say, if this ruling came with confetti and a giant foam finger that says #1 president, I wouldn't be surprised. It's that much of a gift to Trump.
Or Jackson, but Sotomayor said in effect that this court, the Supreme Court, is abusing its powers.
Here's how it all unfolded. Trump's legal team argued that actions he took leading up to and on January 6, 2021 should be protected under a vague umbrella of executive authority. The Supreme Court agreed, or rather, 6 of the justices did. By invoking presumptive immunity, they essentially ruled that a president's actions are too important, too integral to the functioning of the executive branch, to face legal consequences while, wait for it, protecting their ability to lead without distraction. Distraction, we're talking about a violent attack on the Capitol, not an overdue library book. But now, thanks to this ruling, Trump won't likely face accountability for his role in inciting the mob, even as private individuals and organizations continue to deal with the fallout. Justice Sotomayor, to her credit, didn't hold back. Her dissent was scathing. It practically sizzled on the page. She accused the majority of turning the presidency into a king above the law. Think about that for a second.
Fair-minded people on the United States Supreme Court. Sotomayor reminds the court before calling it an abuse of power that she's never seen before.
King, the word is heavy. She's pointing out that while democracy is supposed to tether leadership with accountability, this decision takes scissors to that string and says, nah, let the president fly free. It's not just about Trump, it redefines what the presidency means. Her words, sharp and deliberate, cut straight to it. This court has opened the door for the highest office in the land to escape the rule of law. Now, let's talk about the January 6th trial. This decision has effectively wedged a legal roadblock in front of the case, which was already a high-stakes balancing act. Without the ability to hold Trump accountable for key moments leading up to the insurrection, the prosecution's argument becomes more like Swiss cheese than anything solid. And how did we get here? Well, presidential immunity, a principle meant to ensure that presidents can perform their duties without frivolous lawsuits, has never been stretched this far. It was designed to shield a sitting president, not provide a lifetime warranty on bad behavior.
Legal doctrine that says if you come to the court in equity and you ask the court to do something like grant a stay, you have to be blameless. You have to have clean hands.
Of course, plenty of legal and political experts see this ruling as a dangerous precedent. Constitutional scholars have been sounding the alarm since the moment this decision hit the headlines. Many point out that the court's conservative supermajority isn't just interpreting law anymore, they're re-engineering it, and the implications stretch far beyond Trump himself. Critics argue that if presidents know this kind of immunity exists, they could push boundaries further without fear of consequences. Why worry about ethics when the Supreme Court just handed you an insurance policy?
In light of the government's flagrantly unlawful conduct, today's decision might suggest the government faces extraordinary harms.
But let's not lose sight of the bigger picture. This case doesn't begin and end with Trump. It's about the office of the presidency moving forward. What message does this send to future leaders? Instead of being guided by the pressure to act within the bounds of justice, presidents could feel emboldened to wield power unapologetically. Suddenly, the concept of checks and balances, a cornerstone of American democracy, democracy is looking mighty flimsy. If those in the highest offices aren't held accountable for their actions, how can citizens trust their government to uphold even the basic principles of democracy? On a practical level, this also shifts the balance of power in an unprecedented way. The judiciary has now cemented a shield for the executive branch that many fear tips the scales entirely. Americans are left looking at the White House and wondering if their leader has become untouchable. With this ruling, the Supreme Court has indirectly granted an extraordinary privilege not just to Trump, but to every president who follows. That should make everyone stop and think, not just about this moment, but about the future of governance in a system that's supposed to share power, not hoard it at the top.
And Donald Trump did it anyway. See, the Supreme Court is rewarding the unconstitutional behavior of Donald Trump every time they rule in his favor this way.
And this ruling? It's not an isolated case. It's part of a string of decisions by the current Supreme Court that critics argue increases presidential authority bit by bit. If you've gotten the impression lately that this court likes to expand power while minimizing accountability, well, you're not wrong. From weakening oversight to rolling back mechanisms meant to keep leaders in check, their rulings seem to suggest a broader agenda. Whether intentional or not, they're reshaping constitutional interpretations in ways that could redefine democracy itself. And the scary part, this might just be the beginning. Does it feel like the Supreme Court has been tossing out the rulebook lately, or is it just me? One minute, they're sticking to originalism, swearing by what the founders supposedly intended, and the next, they're flipping precedents and reimagining how the system works entirely. It's like a group project where half the members don't care about the guidelines, and the other half are making bold, random changes to the plan 3 minutes before the deadline. Take the Chevron doctrine, for example. Gone, thanks to the court's ruling in Loper Bright. For 40 years, that doctrine said federal agencies, with their teams of experts, should have some room to interpret laws passed by Congress. Makes sense, right? You pass a law, leave the nerds to figure out the fine print, and let the experts do their thing. Not anymore. In Loper Bright, the court threw the whole standard in the trash, giving courts. And let's be honest, that mostly means this Supreme Court, the power to decide what laws mean instead. Justice for bureaucracy? Not today. Critics argue that this move is less about judicial philosophy and more about weakening federal agencies, especially on issues like environmental protection and public health, where conservative justices seem to have their own agenda.
United States Supreme Court 6-3 has just turned due process upside down and Fifth Amendment rights upside down.
It's all starting to add up to a pattern. These rulings aren't just isolated decisions, they're reshaping how the court interacts with democracy itself. By abandoning precedent and sidelining expertise, they're laying new legal groundwork that shifts power away from long-standing institutions like Congress and federal agencies. And let's not pretend this is all high-minded legal theory either. Critics argue there's a clear ideological tilt here, one that prioritizes conservative outcomes even when the reasoning gets a little shaky. Some legal experts are even questioning whether this court's actions are eroding public trust in the judiciary entirely. If rulings are less about applying the law and more about advancing certain political goals, how are people supposed to trust the court to uphold anything, let alone constitutional principles? Honestly, watching this court operate is a bit like watching a chaotic game of hopscotch. One step forward, 2 steps back, nobody can tell where they'll land next, including, I suspect, some of the justices themselves. Each move feels a little more unpredictable, a little more untethered from the stated rules. In the long run, that kind of improvisation might unravel the judiciary's legitimacy. Sure, you can argue that legal interpretation has always been subjective to a degree, but there was at least a sense that certain lines wouldn't be crossed. Now, those lines seem more like suggestions. What's even more striking is how some of these moves tie back to the presidential immunity ruling. It's hard to separate that decision from the broader pattern of increasing power at the top of the food chain. Whether intentional or not, the court seems to be crafting a legal framework where the executive and judiciary consolidate authority while regulatory agencies and, to some extent, Congress keep losing ground. Picture this. Instead of a government where branches check each other, you get one where certain branches hold most of the power and others are barely hanging on. That's not just a legal shift, that's a fundamental rewrite of how democracy operates.
That's about it. we're going to let Donald Trump, and we're going to reward his bad and unconstitutional behavior.
But let's not get it twisted. For all the talk about philosophy and interpretation, there's a human cost here too. We're talking about decisions that impact real lives. People who rely on federal regulations for clean drinking water, access to healthcare, or protections from violence. When the court prioritizes ideology over these practical concerns, it's not just a legal issue. It's a battle over who gets to live with dignity in this country and who's left scrambling to survive under a system that might not have their back anymore. So where does this all lead? It's not just about a legal playbook, it's about reshaping the field entirely. The court isn't just handing down judgments, it's remapping the judiciary's entire relationship with democracy. That's where the uneasiness comes in. If the top court in the land operates like an unpredictable wild card, what does that mean for the stability of American democracy? Let's just say this isn't about a few bad rulings. It's part of something much bigger, and it's not exactly heading in a direction that inspires confidence. What's scarier, the latest Supreme Court decision or what it says about the future of democracy itself? It's not just about one ruling anymore. It's about how a handful of people are reshaping the way power works in this country. And here's the kicker, not all of it happens front and center in the marble halls of the Supreme Court. A lot of the groundwork starts further down the judicial food chain, particularly in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, which some have called the meth lab of conservative grievance. Charming nickname, isn't it? But when you dig into what's going on there, charming isn't exactly the word that comes to mind.
At the trial court level, same amount at the appeals level, but he's 8-4 at the Supreme Court because he's got the numbers, the MAGA right.
The Fifth Circuit Court covers Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, and let's just say it has a reputation. It's where conservative legal theories are built, tested, and then handed off to the Supreme Court like a science fair project made entirely of duct tape and wild ideas. It's also a favorite spot for judge shopping. This is where litigants pick specific courts within the circuit, like Amarillo, Texas, because they know a single hardline conservative judge might give them exactly the outcome they're looking for. They aren't rolling the dice. They're stacking the deck. What makes it even more interesting, or infuriating depending on your mood, is that the Fifth Circuit seems to have a knack for making extreme rulings only to have the Supreme Court dial them back just slightly. In fact, the Supreme Court reverses this circuit almost 90% of the time. That's not a reversal rate, that's a demolition job. But here's the thing, those reversals aren't really shutting anything down. Instead, they're influencing the Supreme Court to adopt a slightly softer version of those extreme viewpoints, making them seem more reasonable by comparison.
The judge also says that this is an abuse of power of this court. She said, I cannot join so gross.
It's like this. Imagine you're watching a game and suddenly, instead of following the rules, the referee starts rewriting them mid-play. And oh, by the way, the referee has a not so subtle favorite team. That's what's happening here. The Fifth Circuit, and by extension the Supreme Court, are giving the green light for selective enforcement where rules don't matter as much as who holds the gavel. If this all feels a little coordinated, you're not alone in wondering. Some believe judges in the Fifth Circuit are more than just ambitious. They're auditioning. Positions on higher courts, even the Supreme Court itself, are often handed to those who prove they're willing to push the envelope. The more extreme the ruling, the more attention they get. But when power and ambition overlap like this, democracy starts looking less like a system and more like a rigged game. So how does this stack up against other times in US history when democracy felt shaky? You could look at moments like the Gilded Age when corporate power ran unchecked and government oversight was barely a thing, or the McCarthy era when unchecked political paranoia trampled civil liberties. Each of these moments relied on breakdowns in accountability, when the balance of power tilted so far in one direction that everyday people felt powerless to push back.
That there is a doctrine of unclean hands. And if you come to this court asking for equitable relief, you better have clean hands.
And here's the part that should give everyone pause. This doesn't stop with presidents. Sure, the recent rulings expand presidential power and make accountability look optional at best, but they also carve a path for the courts themselves to solidify their own influence. This is how power consolidates, subtly at first and then all at once, until there's no one left with enough authority to push back. Think of this latest presidential immunity ruling. It's not just a one-off decision for Trump, it's a blueprint for what future presidents and courts could get away with. The line between what's legal and what's ethical doesn't just blur, it disappears altogether. That's not governance, that's chaos pretending to be law. The reality is that this isn't just about the cases we're seeing right now, it's about the shift happening behind the scenes. If nothing else, rulings like this should make people think harder about their role in this system. Power isn't supposed to concentrate at the top without anyone watching, yet that's exactly what's happening, and unless people push back, these rulings won't just shape the courts, they'll reshape democracy itself. The Supreme Court isn't just interpreting laws anymore, it's redrawing the boundaries of power, and the direction is clear: upward. Justice Sotomayor's warning about turning the president into a king above the law isn't a metaphor, it's a shot at the heart of accountability. With rulings like these, the question isn't whether democracy is bending, it's whether it'll snap. This isn't happening in a vacuum either, you're part of this equation. If people stay quiet, rulings like this won't just rewrite the rules, they'll rewrite democracy itself. So the real question isn't what the court does next, it's what you'll do about it.